Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Caprara here with the New York Yankees general manager, Brian Cashman. What age did your passion for baseball start?
I was when I was young. I grew up and started in New York, but moved to Kentucky when I was young, and I loved baseball. I don't know why, but back in the day, I was a huge Dodger fan. Listened to all those Dodger games on the radio when their big rivalry with the Reds, which was about 80 miles north of me from where I grew up in Kentucky in Lexington, and I was just crazy for baseball, and obviously played through high school and college, and but then my talent level only took me that far, and then I got tapped out.
So you started as an intern for the New York Yankees. How did you become the general manager?
That's a long story. So I guess I'll turn the clock back. First and foremost, when I was playing college baseball, I played for Catholic University for 4 years. I started all four, and we played mostly a Division I schedule. And I was down in Florida playing Princeton University during the day, and I'd lost all my meal money from the road trip in a high-low card game, believe it or not. And so I wound up having to go. My dad was president and general manager of Castleton Farms, which is a big horse farm in Kentucky, and the owner of that farm also owned Pompano Racetrack. So I went over to Pompano Racetrack. My dad hooked me up. Back then, there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't ATM machine yet, and so I needed to go get cash somewhere. And he said, "Go to Pompano Racetrack." We played Princeton and Boca. Go over to Pompano Racetrack. You get a meal, and we'll get you some cash. So I sat with this guy, Alan Finkelson, who was the PR director of Pompano Racetrack. And Alan had a Yankees 77 World Series ring on. I was talking to Alan about it. I was like, "Where'd you get that?" He had Yankee pictures everywhere. And he turned out to be like best friends with George Steinbrenner. And George Steinbrenner, they were so close. George gave him a world championship ring. And he was a huge Yankee fan. So anyway, he asked me what I was going to do that summer. I was going to play in the Shenandoah Valley Summer Baseball League in Virginia. And he said, "What if I can get you an internship with the Yankees?" And I was all in. And from that point on, who would have thought that type of moment would have led to, an internship starting. I worked security at night at the old Yankee Stadium, and I worked in this minor league scouting department during the day back in 1986. And who would have thought that would have led to where I'm at today?
That's awesome. What a story. How do you deal with the pressure and the stress of being a general manager for the New York Yankees?
I don't know. I think I have a low heartbeat a little bit. I don't get excited. I'm not excitable. I'm not emotional. I'm just kind of even tempered, which I think serves me well. Obviously, being in a position where, especially in an industry where not everything is always going to go right. I think that's probably true of all industries. You have to be in a position to try to just deal with whatever the problem of the day is, figure it out and move forward, or take accountability when things are going wrong, and try to stabilize and plot a new course. And so I don't know, I was kind of born with this type of demeanor, so to speak. I'm not sure if it's a teachable quality or not, but I've always kind of been this way, and I think it serves me well. I'm not an excitable guy.
Oh, stop it. You're excitable. What's the hardest decision you had to make or situation you dealt with during your career?
Wow. I mean, there's so many. I mean, clearly making trades are very difficult because ultimately you're excited about acquiring something that you think is going to benefit you, but you're also parting with something that you personally know. So for instance, when I acquired Roger Clemens from the Toronto Blue Jays, one of the greatest pitchers of this generation that we've gone through, and one of the greatest pitchers of all time, that was exciting to bring him in and import him, but I had to go tell David Wells, Graham Lloyd, and Homer Bush, who were part of that 98 World Championship run where we won 125 games and lost only 50. I had to tell them, in spring training day one, we're trading you to Toronto. And that was really difficult to do, so those type of moments, letting people go, making those tough decisions, to either fire someone or trade someone, because you have personal relationships with people. And then my job is to channel my inner Michael Corleone. It's not personal, it's just business.
Yeah.
But it is personal at the same time. It's personal for the people you're dealing with. And because you care about them, it makes those decisions that much more difficult. But being in the chairman, you can't be afraid to make tough decisions. You have to make them, if you think it's for the greater good.
Of course. You're such a strong individual and you've been through so much. You had to make so many big time decisions. What are some memorable moments that you'll never forget? in your career?
Well, coming through just again, there was an old slogan, that the Yankees marketing department put out, trying to sell why people should go buy tickets to come to games. And the slogan was, at any moment, a great moment. So essentially, don't, if you come to this game, you might see something you've never seen before, essentially is how I would decipher it. But, so being at the old Yankee Stadium, watching Jim Abbott throw a no-hitter was pretty amazing. So I've seen David Cohn's perfect game, David Wells' perfect game, Dwight Gooden's no-hitter, Jim Abbott's no-hitter. Those are like pretty special moments of like, wow, like you just don't see that type of stuff happen much. Being a part of world championship runs, I remember we acquired David Justice, from the Cleveland Indians in a big trade that helped propel us to the 2000 World Championship. And he hit a huge home run that I never heard Yankee Stadium so loud. It was against Seattle to eliminate the Mariners. And it wasn't an elimination game, but it was a big turning point. He hit a home run off of Arthur Rhodes, a great left-handed reliever, and the place just exploded. That was pretty memorable.
Yankee Stadium loud.
Oh yeah, especially the old Yankee Stadium, because the way the architecture of that place was built, the upper deck was so steep that the fans were right on top of the field. It was pretty intimidating, I think, from the opposing teams to deal with. And so anyway, things like that were pretty special. I mean, Jeter's November home run, those walk-off wins against the Arizona Diamondbacks. I mean, you can just keep rambling off moments after moments after moments that, you were there. And, but then smaller moments. I mean, I was in the room when we traded for Paul O'Neill. I remember Gene Michael, and we were in the Radisson Bay Harbor Inn in Tampa, Florida. And, Gene Michael was talking to myself. I was the assistant general manager amongst other personnel, coaches, manager, and like, would you do this? Would you do Paul O'Neill for Roberto Kelly? And Roberto Kelly was a all-star center fielder at the time for us. And Paul coming off of a horrible year in Cincinnati, but we had young Bernie Williams knocking on the door to AAA Columbus, and so those smaller moments about where you were when this stuff happened, and those are pretty special too.
What does the everyday schedule for Brian Cashman look like?
Well, I mean, it just depends on the time of year. I mean, the baseball calendar never stops. Obviously, in the wintertime, typically it's free agency and trades and trying to put the team back together. Obviously, if you're dealing with the typical February, March, you're knee deep usually in a spring training, major and minor league spring training. You've got the season up and running April, May, and June, obviously. But the amateur draft in July is coming quick, and or the international signings in July obviously come quick, and that's on the amateur sides, and the trade deadline, and then the postseason, which we've fortunate enough to be involved with every year for the most part since I've been around. And the clock just doesn't stop turning. Then your next year, you got the GM meetings in November, the winter meetings in December, and you're just doing it all over again. And so the baseball clock just never stops, it seems like. So
what is one thing that motivates you, whether it's a song, a movie, a person?
I'm a competitor. I mean, I like, I don't like to lose. I like to win. I like to be a part of a team, with a stated goal. And, so I love those parameters in my job. I know that not every job has those parameters, and successes and failures are measured at times differently, and depending on what you're doing, but I love being in a position to compete. And obviously it's getting covered, and you want your coverage for your team and for yourself to be positive and uplifting. And the motivation is not to have the adverse side of it, the bad stuff come, but you got to deal with both, right?
Of course.
I love just competing, and it doesn't have to necessarily be just, in the job I have. And I've always been that type of competitor. I want to excel, and I want to do well, and for my company, for myself, and for the people I work with.
You can't teach someone to be competitive. It's either in you or it's not. I feel like.
I agree. I agree. I think that somewhere along the way, you just are so disgusted with failure, or it's so intolerable that you find ways to channel some inner strength to do something about it, whether it's study harder, to ace a test, or pass a test, or work harder to be successful in a work environment, or whatever is necessary. Crush the gym if you're in an athletic situation. Whatever's necessary, you find a way to get it done so you can be be in a position to have success on a consistent basis. But yeah, no one was more successful and competitive than George Steinbrenner, obviously one of the greatest owners of all time. That was a tough guy to work for.
What's one thing you've learned from George Steinbrenner?
He had a sign on his desk. He had a lot of different quotes and stuff, but he had a quote on his desk. It's lonely at the top, and so I got a better feel for that. When you have to make tough decisions, you're not going to make everybody happy. You have to hire someone to do a job. That means you're probably interviewing 10 other people that you have to tell those 9 guys or girls that they're not getting the job. So as you're uplifting somebody by giving an opportunity, you're at the same time simultaneously telling somebody they're not getting that chance, or more, and at times you have to, make changes, and or you have to, as I'm navigating, free agent signings or trade opportunities, you have your pro scouting department, you have your amateur scouting department, which obviously maybe acquired by signing young talent that came up through your system, and you have your analytics crew, and they're all sometimes not on the same page, and you kind of have to gather all information, pull it together, and make a final recommendation to ownership. And you're usually going against somebody else's recommendation too. So as you're thinking you're doing the right thing, you're pissing other people off because you're not picking their course of action. And so anyway, so that sign that I remember he had on his desk kind of resonates more with me now, being in a leadership position, because as leaders, again, you're going to have to break ties, to make half the room happy, the other half of the room, upset, and you just have to live with the results one way or the other. And that's, anyway, that's one thing that stood out to me. I've learned a lot from him. You just got to do what you think is right, and everybody else be damned, and hope it works out. And if it doesn't, be accountable, and the next opportunity, do a better job at it.
I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. And there's definitely a reason for why you're in the position that you are in today. And you do such a great job. What advice do you have to give to young adults who are aspiring to be a general manager?
Well, ultimately, general manager or anything, it's all doable. I'm an example of, who would have thought? I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. It's really, kind of a product of the school of hard knocks, so to speak, where, ultimately I worked my way up a ladder, and I was the assistant farm director. I was the assistant GM for 6 years, assistant farm director for 3 years. I was a baseball operations intern, one point a major league administrator. When I was playing in college, I worked UPS between my fall and spring season. Prior to that, I worked on the horse farm. My dad broke every child labor law in the country, and worked my tail off on a horse farm doing jobs people would never want to do. I love reading sometimes, like, the worst job I've ever had was this. And I'm like, well, some of the things I had to deal with on the horse farm, it's a lot of hard labor. And but ultimately, the long and the short of it is 2 things. We're all capable of so much, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you have to recognize that I share with young people that you never know who's watching you do what you do while you're doing it, right? So I learned that in college, so my college coach was telling me, ultimately, don't cut corners, don't slack off in your practice sessions, and, make sure you go, full bore and take advantage of every opportunity, because it'll pay dividends in season and stuff. And he would notice as a coach, if obviously somebody was like slacking off or what have you. But in the business world, ultimately, and I've seen it for me too, you notice who stands out in a crowd, who's really going the extra mile, who's working their tail off, who's passionate and wants to dominate at whatever that, individual task happens to be at the time. And the senior leadership, whoever they may be in that, company at the time, is noticing, those employees that are doing that type of effort and above and beyond. And for various positions that you don't even know exist, they're like, I want that person on my team. I'm going to, that person standing out. Next, you might get a knock on the door. I call it the sponsors, that you don't see coming in your life. And they knock on your door and they say, hey, would you be interested in the following, which would be, in theory, be an upgraded position. And it's coming out of nowhere. And next, it's like a nice surfing wave that's coming your way. And it's like, you got to be ready to ride it. But to put yourself in the position to be, so to speak, sponsored, have somebody of higher authority take note of you and notice of you, of what you're doing, and want you on their team to promote you and give you an opportunity in some other category. You obviously have to be doing a great deal of things on a consistent basis. And that's where that term I share is you never know who's watching you do what you do while you're doing it. And so if you have that attitude and you take that approach on a daily basis, doors will open up for you. And they have for me. So I'm a living, breathing example of the sky's the limit, and there's a lot more people more qualified and capable and smarter than I ever am, and that should serve people well if they have that type of, they connect that work ethic with their talents. Then the sky is the limit.
I like that. The sky's the limit. Has there ever been a person that has told you that you can't do something? And if so, how did you deal with those words of discouragement?
You know, I'm not sure if I've ever had anybody say you can't do this, you can't do that. But I've always been wired negative. I always think the worst and hope for the best. And so
Oh.
me thinking that I'm not good enough or I'm not capable or I'm not, that gives me the motivating factor to put the extra time in or the research, close the gap, on my, inferiority complex, so to speak. And like, if I'm not good enough, I can't measure up. I don't want to show up in this classroom or this environment or this work, sessions amongst various peers and I think going into it, they're better than me. So how do I close the gap to make myself feel better about being enough prepared and putting myself in the best position to at least compete and if not succeed. And so, that's ultimately what drives me is the fear of failure.
One quote I like is, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. Have you ever heard that one?
I haven't, but I like it. And I love quotes. I mean, I remember I shared a quote with George Steinbrenner, which he actually put in a sign on his desk later on. I came across a quote that said, life is like a dog sled team. Unless you're the lead dog, the scenery never changes.
I love that.
And he loved that quote and obviously then took ownership of it. So, but yeah, I'm a big believer in quotes.
If you can go back in time and change something or do something differently, what would it be?
I mean, I obviously have a lot of different regrets and a lot of different trades, like anything that hasn't worked out that you thought of, like if I could turn the clock back, I would, but you can't. So, one of the things I think is probably healthy is I think you have to learn if there were mistakes made by anything in your process, you need to definitely correct them as you move forward. But any deal that didn't work out for the Yankees, free agent trades, what have you. But some deals didn't work out in the process turned out to be sound. I mean, New York's a very tough place to play.
The game has changed so much since you started. In what ways has that kind of like changed the way you approach decisions?
It has changed. I mean, ultimately, one of the reasons I've had staying power is because I've evolved and I've been open-minded to change. And I feel like the New York Yankees should be using every tool in the toolbox. And as the game had changed with the advent of analytics, for instance, and now performance science, I think I'm very proud that we have, emerged and evolved and grown and made sure that we didn't miss any of these opportunities to make us better in our processes and our decision making, and that's allowed us to stay relevant and competing for a playoff spot and a championship caliber effort on a yearly basis. That has definitely been, one of the reasons I've been around is because of making sure that I hire people smarter than me and stay up with what's current and deciphering what's best to utilize and pay attention to not just our sport but other industry sports as well, both here in Europe and worldwide, where, hey, what is somebody doing that we're not doing that might be benefiting us, and if so, study it and then incorporate those practices or modalities or what have you in a way that we can benefit from it as well.
It's been a long tradition for Yankee players not to shave their facial hair. What are your thoughts on this? Have they considered changing the rule?
I definitely have an opinion on it, but my opinion won't matter regardless. I'll keep it to myself out of the public forum. But ultimately, it's a family tradition, started by George Steinbrenner that the Yankees be clean shaven, and as the society around us have gotten hairier and hairier, so to speak, we have stayed with our policies. So obviously, there's only one decision maker that will change that course, and that would be a Steinbrenner. And so as of right now, that is in full practice. So I'm going to plead the fifth on the rest of it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But it's my job to enforce it. So, and then I empower our manager and our coaches and our, training staffs throughout the systems to make sure that the Yankees represent what the Steinbrenner family want to make sure that they represent. And that is partially a clean shaven look. So amongst other things, winning, clean shaven, there's something about being a Yankee that there's no doubt about that. And they want that profile to continue.
To wrap it up for today, last question I have to ask you: tea or coffee? What do you prefer?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Absolutely. I'm a big yes, love coffee in the morning. It's
decaf or no decaf?
Oh no decaf. Absolutely. Nice nitro cold brew from a Starbucks, vanilla nitro cold brew, or I love, specialty coffee places. So here in Tampa, Buddy Brew is a fantastic spot. And in other cities that they have, pretty cool, coffee haunts. How about you? Are you a tea or coffee?
Tea. I like the smell of coffee though. I do. Okay. I really do. My mom drinks coffee. But anyways, I want to thank you so much for taking the time of your day to speak with me. I really appreciate it. You're doing amazing things. Keep grinding. I'm excited to see this new season coming up, and we're going to do great.
Well, that's from your lips to God's ears. Hopefully, our team stays healthy. And,
Yankees.
And I love it. So I look forward to seeing you in spring training.
All right. I look forward to seeing you too.